What's up guys, welcome back to another video on the channel, and this one is special. We just saw the Cavs beat the Magic in Game 7, so I think it's about time to grade every playoff team's performance in round 1, and give a major takeaway from each series as well. I want to make it very clear that this is only based off of round 1, not the regular season or the rest of the playoffs. But if you like this video, we can grade teams after every round of the postseason. With that out of the way, let's get right into it, starting with the number 1 seed out west. I'm giving the Oklahoma City Thunder an A. My takeaway is that you found a way to be elite at the little things. The 2024 OKC Thunder are a team that was hard to sum up in a single sentence. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a legit MVP candidate. He'll likely either win it all or come in second. Jalen Williams has become a championship level second option over the course of a couple months, and Chet Holmgren is having one of the best rookie seasons of the last 10 years, and if it wasn't for Victor, would probably be a lock to win the award. Even with that being said, they're good, but it's almost confusing how they are this good until you watch them. They lead the league in forced turnovers, and a lot of that comes from the active hands of a guy like Shai and their pure defenders like Lou Dort and Cason Wallace. Rebounding was this team's only real flaw, and they showed that that was not a problem against the Pelicans, who have one of the better rebounding bigs in the league with Jonas Valanciunas. This Thunder team is solid, but more than anything, they're really pesky, and if they keep winning the battles in the small things throughout the stat sheet, they're going to continue adding up over a deep run. They looked incredible. For the Pelicans, I have to give you a D, and my takeaway is that you're committed to Zion now, all the way. I understand it's strange to have a takeaway about a player who wasn't even playing, but if this series taught me anything, it's that the Zion timeline is the Pelicans' only timeline. As much as I can get behind players like Herbert Jones, Dyson Daniels, and especially Trey Murphy being valuable pieces on a potential championship team, the rumors about moving on from Zion have to be shut down as soon as possible. The supporting cast of this team is fine. Don't get me wrong, I'm not forgetting the underrated improvement from Brandon Ingram this year. This was low-key one of his better campaigns, and obviously his injury towards the end of the season held him back from the playoff run that he deserved. But do you trust Zion and Brandon Ingram to be the duo that leads you to a finals one day? I'm not sure, but if your answer is yes, this team needs to be built much differently around them. You don't have a lot of cap room to work with, but one of either CJ McCollum or Jonas Valanciunas needs to be wearing a different jersey next season, and you need playmaking on the perimeter. I know there were jokes about a lack of playmaking, but with CJ McCollum at point guard, it turns your offense into molasses if Brandon Ingram and or Zion isn't open on any given possession, and they get bailed out by deep threes from Murphy or Jones way too often. The West is more competitive than ever, and losing by a sweep solidifies that you're not really one of those streaky teams who could reach the top like OKC or Minnesota, so you need to make changes. You can commit to the live by the 3, die by the 3 mentality, or you can go 2010s Grizzlies with Zion as your modern and better Zach Randolph. But you can't have a team with this level of talent play without an identity, and you need to build around Zion, because that's the best you're going to get for the foreseeable future. It wasn't a great series from them. Next up, we have the Timberwolves and the Suns, but before we get into that, let's hear a word from our sponsors. Big game, big show, any event where you need to stash up tickets, use code NEXTMANUP on SeatGeek for $20 off. That's right, SeatGeek hooked us up with code NEXTMANUP, which will save you $20 when you purchase through their app. Thank you, SeatGeek, but for now, let's kick it back to Anthony Edwards and his Timberwolves. I feel like I have to give the Timberwolves an A+, and my takeaway is that they are saving the old heads' narratives. You guys can stat check me here, but based on my preliminary research, there's only been one team to win the NBA Finals since the year 2000 that was ranked outside of the top 10 in offensive efficiency. The Timberwolves were ranked 17th at the end of the regular season, and they are somehow actually good enough to go all the way. They are changing history. Clearly, that shows how insane their defense is. You could look at the individuals if you wanted to. Gobert's probably going to win DPOY, and Mike Conley, Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, Monte Morris, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, all of those guys get important minutes, a couple of them start, and they all have a defensive rating of 108 or better in the NBA playoffs, which is 7 or more points better than the league average. That's insane. A quick and obvious shout out has to go to Anthony Edwards on his own as well. He contributes to this incredible team defense, but he also on his own averaged 2 steals a game to match his 31 points per game. I am the most impressed by his willingness to play make. It's not often you have Mike Conley on your team and he doesn't lead your team in assists over a playoff series. And although Ant racked up many more turnovers, it's very promising to see someone who is shooting that well still play a team brand of basketball. This team is young, but they actually do have that it factor that champions tend to have, so I'm very high on the Timberwolves. Then on the other side of the series, we look to the Phoenix Suns, who get an F, a big F from me. And the takeaway there is that you need to have a conversation with Bradley Beal. It's over. Whenever a team gets swept, it's easy to point to a single person and make them a scapegoat. I'm worried for Phoenix that that's going to be Frank Vogel, but for many, it's going to be Bradley Beal, and there's some pretty good reasoning behind that. Bradley Beal needs to understand what his role will be if this team is meant to go the distance. I know you make $53 million a year. I know you're one of the most high usage scorers in NBA history with the Wizards, and I know talent-wise you're still borderline an all-star. But if Beal is willing to win, he has to be more of an Eric Gordon and less of a number one option. I understand that is not a compliment, but I think it's poor team building to get a player like that at a max contract value, but it is what needs to happen. KD isn't taking a step back, and as much as I dislike Booker, he needs to be that high volume scorer, and this is where Beal needs to be the best offensive role player in basketball. That's what his role has to be. In the playoffs, Beal shot less than 50% on every single type of shot, except for when he took 0 dribbles or 7+. So when Beal gets to ISO and take a million dribbles, he is still Bradley Beal. If this was Washington where a 10th seed is good enough, he would still be doing fine. But it's obvious that his creation when he has a limited amount of other dribbles is horrible. He also shoots 70% from the field when there's 6 to 10 seconds left on the shot clock. But he often waits an extra 5 seconds or so and takes extra dribbles, which is statistically a worse shot. Beal is meant to be a great spot-up shooter. He's just not willing to do it. Is that Frank Vogel's fault? Is it his? I'm not sure. But if the change doesn't come, then this Suns team will never work out, and there's not much time to work with. Now, we're sticking in the West where we look at the 2023 NBA champions, the Denver Nuggets. They beat the Lakers in 5, and they're going to get a B+. My takeaway from them is that there's really no reason that they shouldn't make the finals. B+ might seem low, but it's more of a compliment than anything, because I think the Nuggets were good enough to sweep LA. Honestly, I know it's a broad take, but there is no excuses if you can't make the finals this year if you're Denver, because you're running back a team that is really just as good with even more experience. Let's talk about a guy I loved in this series, Aaron Gordon. Jamal Murray was a human highlight reel because he kind of always is in late April. Jokic is Jokic, and he's the MVP, but Aaron Gordon stepped up in a big way. He is far from an offensive star, but Game 3 in LA proved that when he needs to produce on offense, he's going to get the job done, and he's still going to be an incredible defensive asset. Having these elite role players is what brings you to finals championships. It's what every finals team has in common. And Aaron Gordon, as well as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, might be 2 of the top 5 role players in the NBA. So although I would have liked to see them sweep because they really were the much better team, I think Denver fans have to leave this one feeling promising going into a very tough matchup with a Timberwolves team that they've seen quite a bit of. Denver is running back a team that we know can win the finals. They have more experience than anyone that's left in the West, so at the end of the day, you just got to get it done. Now on the other side of the coin, it is the Los Angeles Lakers, and unfortunately, I do have to give them a C-. My takeaway from this series is one that a lot of you are probably already thinking. I think the Lakers just need some more youth. I understand that some people aren't going to like this take either, and as someone who cares a lot about the NBA draft and scouting, understand that youth isn't just going to fall in your lap, especially in a weak draft class like this year. Last season, the Lakers took a shot with Hood Schifino, who has been horrible. Austin Reeves was obviously a gem for them a couple of years ago, but he's not really a young star anymore, and this team honestly is just too old. I understand it worked in the bubble, and I respect LA for making that happen, but you're going to run a lineup full of vets every year and expect that to lead you to the chip? You're kind of missing out on the point. Was it nice in 2023 when you upset the inexperienced Grizzlies round 1 because of your experience? Of course. But this is 2 years in a row where Denver beat you up, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the other team in the West with a ton of experience, a ton of vets that know what they're doing, is the one you can't beat. I know LeBron has a short timeline, and it seems like he's pondering retirement once again, but you need to be looking at ways to add any young talent that you can. Not only to be a spark plug off the bench, but also just to have some fresh legs in the lineup. The NBA season is grueling, and when you are running guys who are on the older side, and a lot of them have an injury history, you need young guys that you can rely on, not guys like Max Christie and Hood Schifino who you're scared to put in the game. The Lakers have a lot of decisions to make in the offseason. Are they going to overhaul the whole roster like they've tended to do recently, or are they going to stick with the guys that worked throughout the regular season? It really can go either way, but you have to be kind of disappointed with a first-round knockout for a team like the Lakers that is always going to have such high expectations. And for the last series in the West, it is of course the Dallas Mavericks beating the Clippers in 6 games, and starting with the Mavericks, they're going to get an A from me. And what my takeaway is actually not even about Kyrie or Luka. My takeaway is that their big man rotation has made them legit. The Mavericks knew that they would only walk out of this series with a victory if it was on the shoulders of Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. And both of those guys, especially Kyrie, they did make that happen. But I think we have to talk about this front court stepping up in this series in a way I did not expect, which if you told me that was the case at the start of the season, I would have laughed you off because they had a horrible front court coming into the year. They changed that. PJ Washington has been incredible for Dallas since he was acquired, and arguably is one of the best overall defenders in the NBA right now. Daniel Gafford is a spark plug for this team. I love what he does, and Derek Lively is impressive, especially with his efficiency on the offensive end. He has stepped up in a big way. I know the Clippers weren't at full strength, and I know the Mavericks may have been a popular upset pick, but the fact that Dallas looked so convincing in this series as a lower seed, and their role players exceeded pretty much all of my expectations throughout it, earns them an A grade. They are going into a matchup hot, and if they're guys that aren't their stars, if Kyrie and Luka just handle business and these role players step up the way they have, nobody is going to want to play Dallas. It was a big series win over the Clippers. Now, unfortunately, Clippers fans, I gotta talk about you guys, and I'll be a little nice here almost. I'm gonna give you a C-, and my takeaway from this series is that your future is just becoming uncertain. Why am I being nice to the Clippers? I know a lot of people will give them an F. It's because Kawhi didn't play, and as much as that seems to be a common theme, I do have to count that into my grades. What I do know about this series, though, is that playoff P struck again, and the Clippers have found themselves in familiar territory being knocked out early. There are so many ways you could go about this offseason, and I think there still is an argument to be made that if the Clippers had more time to mesh this big three together, and of course they were healthy in the playoffs, that they would be a contender. I think that's fair, but that didn't happen. It is worth mentioning that James Harden and PG could both be on the move this offseason, and there is a world where both of them go, although I think it'd be likely one or the other. In that scenario, there would be a real discussion about moving Kawhi Leonard, which I know Steve Ballmer is looking to avoid, especially with the new revenue he plans to bring in with the new stadium and the rebrand. There's no saying exactly what the Clippers do moving forward, and even with Kawhi's injury struggles, it's hard to feel good about this team being knocked out early again in the playoffs. So you tell me, guys, what do the Clippers do? Rebuild? Re-up? Run it back? Every possibility is open for LA, but the pressure is on to make a decision, and they really need to make the right one. Alright, now let's go to the East, where the Celtics beat the Heat in 5 as the 1 seed. For the Celtics, maybe this is harsh, but I want to be realistic here. I give the Celtics a B. My takeaway is that they cannot afford to lose a step, and I think you guys know what I mean. Winning against a team that tends to give you problems every season is something that cannot be overlooked, and let's relax about it being in 5. That's playoff ball, and Coach Bo's going to get one. Fair enough. What needs to be very clear is that Boston can't afford to lose a step. One thing that stood out about the Celtics this year rather than years past is that they were so much better, but more so that they never seemed to take their foot off the gas. Enough so where their losses this season are incredibly memorable because it seems like they'd always be sandwiched between 30-point wins. That's what made Boston scary, and while they had some blowout victories in round 1, they have to find ways to keep dominating, especially with Porzingis prepping to miss some time. Jaylen Brown looked really solid in round 1, Derek White's game 4 and game 5 were incredible, but Tatum honestly hasn't looked great. Obviously, Horford has been moved back to the starting rotation, and you cannot take a step off the gas because you do not want to fumble a championship opportunity to a streaky team who has a fire under their belt and have actually played you pretty well this season. Round 2 might be scary for Boston. They get out of round 1, but I still think we all want to see more from the Celtics if we're confident that they can win it all. Now let's look to the Heat. The Heat were in a very tough spot this playoffs, I'm very aware of that, so I give them a C-. My takeaway, it wasn't meant to be, but in general, I think you might have to reevaluate your strategy. For the Heat, you needed a lot of things to go in your favor for this series to work out, and they just didn't happen, so here we are. Jimmy Butler missing the playoffs was not in your cards, so I can't be too harsh. You gotta respect getting a win as well, but this leads me to a bigger point. I think you have to switch your mentality. I'm not talking about Heat culture, and for all the memes and the problems people have with that phrase, Spo and company are solid, so I like all that stuff. That's not what I mean. What I mean is how you attack the regular season. Like most teams, Miami had some lingering injury throughout the year which set them back, but the whole coast through the regular season and lock in for the playoffs thing doesn't really work when you're not truly one of the best teams in the league anymore. This series would have been different with Jimmy, I know. But imagine if the Heat cared that much more in the regular season to the point where they got a 5th seed or a 6th seed, and instead of Boston in the first round, who would have been an uphill battle anyways, we're talking about a Giannis-less Bucks team or a Cavs team that the Heat probably could have given a lot more problems. I know this take has been said before. I believe Kenny Beecham has said something similar for the last couple of years, but being an underdog can be great for teams, obviously Miami included, but at some point you have to consider making strides in the regular season so you can set yourself up for more success come summertime, especially if you deal with injuries like they did this season. Now to the Pacers-Bucks series, where the Pacers would win it in 6. For Indiana, I'm giving them a B+. My takeaway? Your bench mob is your lifeline. I could sit and talk about how Pascal Siakam was a game-changing decision for Indiana and rave about how a guy like Miles Turner stepped it up to another level against the Bucks. But I think we need to talk about this team's bench. Obi Toppin had an up-and-down season, but come playoff time, this guy's putting up 12 and 6 a game on solid efficiency, and his effort mixed with backup point guard TJ McConnell's incredible Game 6 is what sealed the deal for the Pacers to make it to the second round. Even a guy like Ben Shepherd came in and played almost 20 minutes per game. This bench is deep. Depth in the playoffs can only take you so far, but when you have to find ways to beat a team like New York, it's probably going to be by cycling guys in and seeing who works, and there's no team more well equipped to try that than Indiana. We saw the Heat do it last year to the Celtics. The easiest way to knock off a team that is by all accounts better than you is to ride with the hot hand, and the Pacers have a lot of options. It goes without saying that when you beat your rivals who are struggling with injuries, it feels good, but whether the Bucks were healthy or not, this gives the Pacers a full head of steam, and they look really good right now. Now, we have to talk about the Bucks. I'm going to give them a D. And I know it's tough, but my takeaway is that you sold a contending team for a big 3, so it kind of has to work. First off, injuries suck, and I know with Giannis healthy this is a completely different series, but you almost signed yourself up for this. I'm not saying that Damian Lillard was a bad addition, you still have on paper one of the best teams in basketball, but you had to give up assets to get there, and it kind of feels like you blew up a good thing for the prospect of something else. I know losing to an 8th seed is horrible, I know you have high expectations, but now you have a brand new coach, you have a big 3 with guys who aren't always healthy, and your role players which have been amazing on your playoff runs in the past are aging. You can't bank on them being great forever. It's really difficult to give this team a grade because I can't tell you if they would have got out of this one if the circumstances were different. Even with a healthy team, they struggled with Indiana in the past. But what I will say is that it seems as if your championship window just got even smaller. And when you have one of the best players in the entire sport, of course being Giannis, that's not a good sign. Is Doc the answer? Are we going to get a healthy Dame, Giannis, Middleton trio in the playoffs ever? Or will this new-look Bucks team look to be a mistake? Only time will tell, but they are not off to a hot start in their new era. And now, arguably the most exciting first-round matchup, of course, was the Knicks versus 76ers, where the Knicks won in a thrilling fashion in 6 games. For New York, they're going to get an A- from me. My takeaway is that you definitely have the right guys around Brunson. I think it says a lot about the Knicks that their best player, All-Star, and All-NBA point guard averaged 35 and 9 in their first-round matchup, and the storyline is still about the other guys on the squad. Josh Hart came to play, a guy that wasn't the best from regular season shooting from deep. He comes out and shoots 43% from behind the arc, capped off, of course, by a dagger in Game 6. That's electric. OG Anunoby, Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein put up offensive rebounding clinics in multiple games. That's electric. Even a guy like Dante DiVincenzo struggling early on and then making clutch free throws down the stretch, that is what you like to see. Most people had faith in Brunson going in. I know I did. But due credit to the other Knicks. This team is still considered a legit contender despite missing the talents of Julius Randle. That's how good this supporting cast is. That is a very scary sign for the other teams out in the East. For the 76ers, obviously a tough series. I'm going to give them a C. My takeaway is that now you have a blank slate, you kind of have to use it. The 76ers, kind of like the Clippers I mentioned earlier, they're back in a spot we've seen them quite often in the post-process era. But this time, they actually have some leverage. Maxey is a legit second option on a championship team, I'm confident saying that. Embiid obviously needs to stay healthy, but you kind of do have to bank on him being your go-to guy, so he's obviously still the answer. This offseason, the Sixers are going to have money, they're going to have draft capital, and they're going to have to make a move. Paul George is a name that's been coming up. DeJounte Murray would be kind of interesting. Maybe even a guy like Lauri Markkanen becomes available. Whoever it is, you need a legit third star. The Tobias Harris era is over, and now you have to make the most of it because Joel Embiid is not getting any younger, and at some point, you're going to have to pay Maxey more than what he makes now. Your championship window is closing quicker than you think, and I think the 76ers might take this loss as a sign that this is their last shot before they are forced to blow it up, so expect a big offseason from Philly. If not, expect more of the same. And for the last series we saw cap off, the only first round series that went to 7 games, the Cavs beat the Magic in 7. For the Cavs, I'm going to have to give them a B, and my takeaway is that you can only go as far as Donovan Mitchell takes you. I know this might sound obvious, but the Cavs are nothing if not for Donovan Mitchell this year. Credit to the role players as well. I mean, LeVert came to play in Game 7, Strus has had an exceptional year, and guys like Isaac Okoro do have a ton of value. But in a series where Jared Allen was hurt, Darius Garland wasn't at the level you'd hope, and Mobley continued to struggle on offense, Donovan Mitchell made it possible. Credit to team defense as well. The Cavs were faced with a challenge going against a defensive-oriented team like Orlando, and it turned out that the Cavs still found a way to be better on that end of the ball. Donovan Mitchell was incredible, and when things got ugly, which happened a lot, he was the only person on either side confident enough to take things into his own hands. Boston is going to be a tough matchup no matter how you look at it, but if Donovan Mitchell continues to play like one of the best guards in the league, Cleveland will continue to have a chance. And for the last team we're going to break down in this video, of course it is the Orlando Magic, and I actually give them a C. My takeaway, they're still young, but now it's time to compete. The Magic came out on the wrong end of a slugfest series against the Cavs, and I can't be too disappointed considering the expectations Orlando has smashed all season. This team was not expected to be so competitive, and the duo of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner is developing into something really special. The timeline actually might be moving faster than you expect, but the Magic need to take this as a sign to invest as soon as possible. They have the ability to free up some money, and they desperately need some extra offense on the squad. And I know there are folks who want them to snatch up a pure playmaking point guard, even with the depth they have in the backcourt. The Magic were first-round exits, but I think they have the assets to bring in another impactful player and try to make a deeper run going forward. This team is solid. I think they're just a couple pieces away. So there it is, guys, a grade for every NBA team after round 1 of the NBA playoffs, and of course some analysis to go with it. Let me know if you want a rundown like this after round 2, and leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. This was Next Man Up. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.